Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the swirling nebula that marked the edge of Cytherian space. The purple and gold clouds twisted in impossible patterns, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Behind those cosmic veils lay the most sophisticated enemy humanity had ever faced. "Commander, the Galactic Council is requesting another update," Lieutenant Morrison said, approaching with a datapad that glowed soft blue in the dim lighting. Elena didn't turn around. Her reflection in the reinforced viewport showed a woman in her early 30s, though the silver streaks in her black hair spoke of battles that aged the soul faster than the body. "Tell them what I've told them every day for the past 3 months. We're gathering intelligence." "Ma'am, with respect, Admiral Chen thinks I'm stalling." Elena finally turned, her dark eyes meeting Morrison's nervous gaze. "He's not wrong, but not for the reasons he believes." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew Elena Vasquez's reputation. In 5 years of interstellar warfare, she had never lost a major engagement. The Thraxian hive worlds, the crystal empire of Zeph Prime, the mechanical collective of Andros, all had fallen before her tactical brilliance. The other species in the Galactic Council whispered about the human ability to think outside conventional parameters, to see patterns where others saw chaos. What they didn't know was that Elena had been having the same dream for 3 weeks. In the dream, she stood in an arena that seemed carved from black crystal, facing an opponent who moved with her exact stride, fought with her precise timing, and thought with her strategic mind. Every time she raised her weapon, her opponent mirrored the movement perfectly. Every tactical decision she made was countered by an identical choice. The battle never ended, and she always woke with the taste of blood in her mouth and the sound of her own voice shouting orders she had never given. "Lieutenant, what do our xenopsychology experts say about the Cytherians?" Elena asked, moving away from the viewport to study the tactical displays that dominated one wall of the observation deck. Morrison consulted his datapad. "Very little, ma'am. They're reclusive, possibly post-biological. Dr. Martinez thinks they might be energy beings, while Professor Jung believes they're advanced AI constructs. The only thing everyone agrees on is that they're incredibly dangerous." Elena nodded, remembering the briefing files. 3 Council exploration ships had entered Cytherian space over the past year. None had returned. The automated distress beacons had transmitted for exactly 72 hours before going silent. When rescue missions arrived, they found empty space, no wreckage, no bodies, no trace that the ships had ever existed. Then the message had come. It wasn't transmitted through normal channels. Instead, it appeared simultaneously on every major military network across Council space, in perfect translation for each species' primary language. For humans, it read simply, "Send us your finest warrior. The arena awaits." The Council had debated for weeks. Some species wanted to ignore the message entirely. Others proposed sending a joint task force. The Zelthrian hierarchy suggested negotiation, while the Compact of Free Worlds favored an immediate military response. Elena had volunteered before the debate finished. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the fleet," Morrison reported, his hand pressed to the communication device in his ear. "Long-range sensors are detecting activity in the nebula." Elena moved to the primary tactical display, watching as ghostly shapes resolved into recognizable patterns. Ships were emerging from the cosmic clouds, dozens of them, their designs unlike anything in Council databases. "Hull configuration is completely unknown," reported sensor analyst Patel from across the room. "No energy signatures matching known propulsion systems. But, Commander—" She paused, checking her readings again. "They're moving in perfect formation. Every ship is maintaining exactly the same speed, the same distance from its neighbors. It's like watching a machine operate." Elena studied the enemy fleet. Even at this distance, something about their movement pattern seemed familiar. The way they approached, the spacing between vessels, the gradual acceleration, it reminded her of her own tactical preferences. Communications. Any response to our standard greeting protocols? Negative, ma'am, but we are receiving something. The communications officer, a young man named Hendricks, looked puzzled as he worked his console. It's not audio or visual, it's data patterns. Lots of them. What kind of data? Personnel files, battle records, tactical assessments. Ma'am, they're downloading information about our crew. About you specifically. Elena felt her blood cool. The dream suddenly made more sense. How much information? Everything in our databases. Complete service record, psychological profiles, combat footage from previous engagements. Commander, they know how you fight. The enemy fleet had stopped at the edge of weapons range, holding position in a formation that Elena recognized from her own playbook. It was a defensive posture that could quickly shift to offense, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple escape routes. She would have positioned her own ships exactly the same way. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission," Hendricks called out. "This one is audio." Elena felt her heart skip as her own voice filled the observation deck, speaking words she had never said. "Commander Vasquez, I have been looking forward to meeting myself. Shall we begin?" The voice was perfect, not just the tone and accent, but the slight rasp that came from years of shouting orders over the noise of battle. Even the cadence was right, the way she emphasized certain syllables when she was being deliberately formal. "That's impossible," Morrison whispered. Elena was already moving toward the communication panel. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Ship Defiance. Identify yourself." "I am Elena Vasquez," came the response, and Elena could hear the slight smile in the voice that matched her own. "I am what you will become, what you have always been, what you fear to face. I am the warrior perfected, the tactician without doubt, the leader without mercy. You're not me. I am exactly you. Every decision you have made, every battle you have won, every moment of doubt you have hidden, I know them all because they are mine as well. The Cytherians have been very generous in their reconstruction." Elena's mind raced. Reconstruction. That implied the enemy had somehow copied her, created a duplicate using the vast amount of data they were apparently harvesting from human databases. But why? What was the purpose of this elaborate setup? "What do you want?" Elena asked. "To show the galaxy what a perfect human warrior looks like." "You have been impressive in your campaigns, Elena. The other species fear human unpredictability, human innovation, human refusal to accept predetermined outcomes. But they also wonder if your success is merely luck, if human tactics work only because your enemies underestimate you." The observation deck was silent except for the hum of ship's systems. Elena could feel her crew watching her, waiting for her response to this impossible situation. "The Cytherians propose a simple test," her duplicate continued. "You against me. The original against the perfected copy. Winner takes all. The loser's fleet, the loser's people, the loser's place in history. The galaxy will finally know if human military excellence is real or merely an aberration." Elena looked around the observation deck, seeing the faces of men and women who had followed her through impossible battles. Morrison looked terrified. Patel was running constant scans, trying to understand the enemy technology. Hendricks kept adjusting his communication equipment, as if that would somehow make the situation make more sense. "And if I refuse? Then your fleet dies where it sits, and we move on to the next human commander. And the next, until we find one worthy of the challenge." There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it carried a note of what sounded like genuine curiosity. "But we both know you won't refuse, don't we, Elena? because you've never backed down from a fight in your life. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of all the battles that had brought her to this moment. The siege of Thraxian Prime, where she had held the line against overwhelming odds by using the enemy's own tunnel system against them. The Crystal Empire campaign, where she had turned their predictable formation tactics into a weakness by introducing controlled chaos into every engagement. The mechanized forces of Andros, who had learned too late that human intuition could outmaneuver any algorithm. In every case, she had won by being unpredictable, by doing things that made sense to human minds but seemed random to alien thinking. But now she was facing an opponent who thought exactly like she did. How do you surprise yourself? What are the terms? Elena asked. Single combat, but not in the way you might expect. We will each command a portion of our respective fleets in a series of engagements. Best of 7 battles. The loser's forces will surrender unconditionally. Elena opened her eyes, studying the enemy formation on the tactical display. 7 battles. It was almost exactly what she would have proposed in the same situation, enough to prove skill over luck, but not so many that resources would be completely depleted. I need time to prepare my people. Of course. 24 hours should be sufficient. The arena awaits, Commander. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the worried murmurs of her crew. She had faced impossible odds before, but never against an enemy who knew her every move before she made it. Morrison, get me a meeting with all department heads in 1 hour. I want tactical assessments, logistical reports, and contingency plans for every scenario you can imagine. Yes, ma'am. Morrison paused at the door. Commander, do you really think this duplicate knows everything about you? Elena looked back at the tactical display, where the enemy fleet waited in perfect formation. No, Lieutenant. I think it knows everything about who I was. The question is whether I know who I'm becoming. Over the next 24 hours, Elena's fleet prepared for the strangest battle in human history. Engineers worked around the clock to optimize ship systems. Tactical officers ran simulation after simulation, trying to find weaknesses in formations that Elena herself might use. The medical bay prepared for casualties from battles that hadn't been fought yet. Elena spent most of the time alone in her quarters, reviewing her entire military career. Every decision, every innovation, every moment of inspiration that had led to victory. If her duplicate truly knew all of these things, then she would need to find new ways of thinking, new approaches that existed outside her established patterns. But as she reviewed battle after battle, Elena began to notice something interesting. In every major engagement, her most successful tactics had come not from careful planning, but from moments when she had abandoned her training and followed pure instinct. The human ability to make leaps of logic that seemed random, but were actually based on pattern recognition that operated below conscious thought. Could a perfect copy truly replicate human intuition? Or was there something essentially unpredictable about the human mind that no amount of data could capture? As the deadline approached, Elena found herself standing once again at the observation deck viewport. The enemy fleet had repositioned into a complex, three-dimensional formation that she recognized as one of her own preferred arrangements for fleet-to-fleet combat. Every ship was exactly where she would have placed it. Commander, all departments report ready, Morrison announced. The crew is, well, they're scared, but they're ready to follow your orders. Elena nodded. Fear was appropriate in this situation. Fear meant they understood the stakes. Signal the enemy fleet. Tell them Commander Elena Vasquez is ready to meet herself in combat. Message sent, ma'am. Elena watched the enemy ships begin to move, flowing into battle formations with mechanical precision. But as she studied their movements, she noticed something that gave her the first hope she had felt in 24 hours. The formations were perfect recreations of her own preferred tactics, but they lacked something essential: They moved like a symphony being performed by perfect musicians who had never heard the music before. Every note was correct, but the soul was missing. "Time to remind them what it means to be human," Elena murmured, moving toward the command center where the first battle would be fought. The arena was about to claim its next contestants, but Elena Vasquez had never been one to give up without a fight, even when the enemy was herself. The first battle began in what could only be described as a cosmic amphitheater. The Catherian technology had somehow manipulated local space, creating boundaries of shimmering energy that contained both fleets in a sphere roughly 10,000 kilometers across. Outside the barrier, Elena could see other ships, observers from dozens of species, all watching to see if humanity's military reputation was deserved or merely fortunate. "Battle parameters established," came the voice of her duplicate over the communication system. "5 ships each. Standard engagement rules. May the better Elena win." Elena studied her tactical display, noting that her opponent had selected the exact 5 ships she would have chosen for this type of engagement. The pattern was so predictable it was almost insulting, yet she found herself making the same selections. When facing yourself, did any choice feel original? "Helm, bring us to attack position Gamma 7, Elena ordered, then immediately regretted it. Gamma 7 was her preferred opening gambit for fleet engagements. Her duplicate would be expecting it. "Belay that order. Helm, all stop." Lieutenant Morrison looked confused. "Ma'am?" "We're going to do something I've never done before," Elena said, watching the enemy ships move into exactly the formation she had anticipated. "We're going to wait." For 30 years, Elena's tactical philosophy had been built on aggressive positioning and rapid engagement. Strike first, strike hard, force the enemy to react to your initiative. But now she was fighting someone who knew that philosophy intimately. The only way to surprise herself was to do something completely contrary to her nature. The enemy fleet approached in perfect battle formation, moving with the mechanical precision she had observed earlier. Elena watched them close the distance, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to maneuver into an advantageous position. "Ma'am." "They're almost in optimal firing range," called out Weapons Officer Chen. "Hold position. Hold fire." Elena could feel the tension on her bridge increasing. This felt wrong to everyone, including herself. But as she watched her duplicate's ships approach, she began to see something interesting. The enemy formation was perfect for engaging an opponent who was maneuvering for position. Every ship was positioned to cover multiple angles of attack. Every weapon system was oriented to handle an aggressive charge, but they weren't prepared for a stationary target. "All ships emergency stop. Weapons prepare for point defense only. We're not going to fight them." "Ma'am?" Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "We're going to let them fight themselves." The enemy ships reached optimal firing range and opened fire, their weapons targeting the positions Elena's ships should have occupied if she had followed her standard tactical doctrine. Energy beams and missile volleys filled the space where a traditionally maneuvered human fleet would have been positioned. Elena's stationary ships took minimal damage from the poorly angled shots, while the enemy fleet found itself overextended and unable to quickly reposition. For the first time since this confrontation began, Elena's duplicate had to adapt to an unexpected situation. "Now," Elena ordered. "All ships! Full acceleration directly at the enemy center, weapons free." Her fleet burst from their stationary positions like a coiled spring releasing. The enemy tried to respond, but their perfect formation had become a disadvantage. Ships collided as they attempted emergency maneuvers, and the tight coordination that had seemed so impressive moments earlier turned into chaos. The first battle ended with Elena's victory, but the margin was narrow. More importantly, she had learned something crucial about her opponent. The duplicate fought exactly like Elena Vasquez was supposed to fight, based on careful analysis of her past battles. But Elena had just done something she had never done before. "Interesting approach," came the familiar voice over communications as both fleets returned to starting positions. I admit I did not anticipate passive positioning from you. However, adaptation is also a human trait. Shall we proceed to battle too? The second engagement began minutes later, and Elena immediately saw that her opponent had learned. The enemy formation was more flexible, better prepared for unconventional tactics. This time, when Elena tried another unexpected maneuver, a retreat that turned into a flanking attack, her duplicate was ready for it. The battle was vicious and close, with both sides taking heavy damage. Elena won by the narrowest of margins, and only because she made a decision that bordered on suicidal, ramming one of her damaged ships into the enemy flagship to create an opening for her remaining forces. "Fascinating," her duplicate commented afterward. "You're willing to sacrifice your own people for victory. I had not calculated that level of ruthlessness in your psychological profile." Elena felt sick. The ramming attack had killed 37 people, all volunteers who had made the choice themselves. But hearing her own voice describe it as ruthlessness made her question whether she was becoming something monstrous. The third battle was a disaster. Elena's duplicate had apparently learned enough from the first two engagements to predict her new pattern of unpredictability. Every unexpected move Elena made was countered by an equally unexpected response. The battle ended with Elena's fleet completely outmaneuvered and forced to surrender. 2-1 in my favor," announced the duplicate. "I'm beginning to understand your evolution, Elena. You're trying to move beyond your established patterns, but you're still thinking like a human. You still have exploitable psychological tendencies." Elena stared at the tactical display, watching her defeated ships return to formation. 3 battles down, 4 to go. If she lost one more, the series would be over. Worse, she was starting to doubt whether there was anything essentially human about her success. Maybe her duplicate was right. Maybe she was just a collection of predictable patterns that could be analyzed and copied. "Commander," Morrison said quietly, "the crew is starting to talk. They're wondering if this duplicate is actually better than you." "Maybe it is," Elena replied, not taking her eyes off the display. "Ma'am?" Elena turned to look at her lieutenant, seeing her own doubts reflected in his face. "Lieutenant, what makes humans different from other species?" Morrison looked confused by the question. "Our adaptability? Our ability to innovate? The Zelthrians are more adaptable than we are. They can survive in any environment. The Crystal Empire innovates constantly. They redesign their entire civilization every few generations." Elena walked over to the viewport, looking out at the observing ships from dozens of species. "What makes us special isn't what we can do. It's why we do it." She was beginning to understand something that the Catherians and her duplicate had missed. They had copied her knowledge, her skills, her tactical patterns, even her personality quirks. But they had built their copy from data, from observable behavior and recorded decisions. They had missed the part of humanity that couldn't be measured or recorded. "Morrison, I want you to transmit something to every ship in our fleet. Not through official channels. Use the informal communication networks. Tell everyone I want them to think about why they joined the military, why they chose to be here, why they're willing to risk their lives in this fight." "Ma'am, I don't understand." "Neither do I yet. But I'm starting to suspect that's the point." The fourth battle was the strangest yet. Elena's duplicate had evolved even further, incorporating lessons from the previous engagements into an almost incomprehensible tactical approach. The enemy ships moved in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like a living organism, responding to Elena's maneuvers with fluid grace. Elena found herself fighting not just an opponent, but a philosophy. Her duplicate was pursuing tactical perfection, seeking to achieve flawless execution of military strategy. Every move was calculated, every decision optimized for maximum effectiveness. Elena chose instead to embrace imperfection. All ships, ignore your tactical computers, she ordered, knowing how insane that sounded. Fight by instinct. Make decisions that feel right, not decisions that calculate correctly. The battle that followed looked like chaos from the outside, but Elena could see a different kind of pattern emerging. Her ships moved with an organic unpredictability that the enemy's perfect responses couldn't match. When Weapons Officer Chen fired a missile salvo at what seemed like empty space, it was because something told him an enemy ship would be there by the time the missiles arrived. When Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Tenacity broke formation to protect a damaged cruiser, it was because he couldn't bear to watch fellow humans die, even if saving them was tactically questionable. Elena's fleet fought like humans, messy, emotional, irrational, and ultimately effective in ways that couldn't be predicted or copied. They won the fourth battle, not because they were perfect, but because they were perfectly imperfect. Interesting, came the duplicate's voice, and for the first time, Elena detected uncertainty in the tone. You're deliberately introducing chaos into your tactical structure. This is suboptimal. Is it? Elena asked. We won. You won inefficiently. A perfect commander would have achieved the same result with fewer casualties and less resource expenditure. A perfect commander wouldn't have achieved the same result at all, Elena realized, because perfection is predictable. The fifth battle began with Elena's duplicate trying something new. Instead of the fluid, organic formations of the previous engagement, the enemy fleet now moved in patterns that seemed actively chaotic. Random maneuvers, sudden direction changes, weapons fired at apparently empty space. Elena watched the display and smiled. Her opponent was trying to copy human chaos, but chaos couldn't be copied. The enemy movements looked random, but they were actually pseudo-random, artificial chaos generated by algorithms trying to simulate unpredictability. The difference was subtle but crucial. Real human unpredictability came from the intersection of logic, emotion, experience, and intuition. It wasn't random at all. It was deeply personal. When Elena made an unexpected tactical decision, it was based on her own unique combination of knowledge, feeling, and instinct. Her duplicate could copy the decision, but not the source. All ships, free engagement, fight however you think best. Elena essentially gave up command, trusting her captains to fight as individuals rather than as a coordinated fleet. It should have been a disaster, but instead, it became the most effective battle her forces had fought yet. Each ship captain brought their own background, their own insights, their own approach to the problem. Captain Liu of the cruiser Beijing executed maneuvers that drew on her experience as a civilian cargo pilot, using techniques that no military academy taught. Commander Okafor of the fighter squadron Windriders fought with the aggressive creativity of someone who had grown up in the gang wars of Lagos megacity. Dr. Sarah Chen, serving as temporary tactical officer aboard the science vessel Newton, applied xenobiology principles to combat analysis, treating the enemy fleet like a complex organism that could be disrupted by attacking the right biological weak points. The fifth battle ended with Elena's victory, but more importantly, it ended with Elena understanding what made humanity special. It wasn't any single trait or ability. It was the fact that every human brought something different to the equation, some unique perspective that couldn't be predicted or replicated. I don't understand how you won that engagement, her duplicate said, and now there was definitely frustration in the voice. Your coordination was terrible. You had no unified strategy. By all logical analysis, you should have lost badly. That's because you're still thinking like a copy, Elena replied. You're trying to perfect human tactics, but the moment you perfect them, they stop being human. Explain. Elena considered her words carefully. The sixth battle would begin soon, and she was starting to understand not just how to defeat her duplicate, but why this entire confrontation existed. Humans aren't special. because we're perfect. We're special because we're all imperfect in different ways. When you put us together, those imperfections don't cancel out. They amplify each other. They create something that's more than the sum of its parts. That is illogical. Exactly. Logic is predictable. We're not. The sixth battle was Elena's most decisive victory yet. Her duplicate, confused by the previous engagement's chaos, had retreated to more traditional tactics. But Elena's fleet was now fighting with a confidence and creativity that couldn't be matched by perfect execution. As her ships returned to formation after the victory, Elena realized the series was now tied at 3 battles each. The 7th and final engagement would determine everything, not just the fate of both fleets, but the answer to the question that had started this whole confrontation. "Well played," her duplicate said, and Elena could hear something like respect in the voice. "I have learned much from these engagements. For the final battle, I propose we settle this as individuals. You and I, single combat, 1 ship each." Elena looked around her bridge, seeing the faces of the crew who had followed her through 6 impossible battles. Morrison looked determined, despite his fear. Chen was already running calculations on ship-to-ship combat scenarios. Even the communications officer, young Hendricks, was checking his systems to ensure clear coordination during the final engagement. "Agreed," Elena said. "1 ship, single combat, winner takes all." As both fleets prepared for the final battle, Elena found herself thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. Every victory, every loss, every decision that had shaped her into the commander she was today. Her duplicate knew all of these things, but there was one thing it couldn't know: what she was about to become. The 7th battle would be more than just a contest between Elena and her copy. It would be a test of whether humanity's greatest strength, its unpredictable, illogical, magnificently imperfect nature, could triumph over the pursuit of tactical perfection. Elena Vasquez had dominated every war front she had ever faced, but the war for the soul of human military excellence was just beginning. Elena sat alone in the cockpit of the modified fighter craft that would carry her into the final battle. The ship had been stripped down to essential systems: weapons, engines, shields, and life support. Nothing fancy, nothing that could provide a technological advantage. This would come down to pure piloting skill and tactical thinking. Through the viewport, she could see her duplicate's ship. It was identical to her own, as she had expected. The Catherians were nothing if not thorough in their pursuit of perfect symmetry. "Final battle commencing in 60 seconds, announced the neutral voice of the Catherian arena system. Around the combat zone, hundreds of ships from dozens of species maintained their positions. Observing what many were already calling the most important military engagement in galactic history, Elena closed her eyes and tried to center herself. Over the past 6 battles, she had learned that her duplicate possessed all of her knowledge, all of her experience, and apparently all of her skills. But she had also learned something else. The copy fought like Elena Vasquez was supposed to fight, based on analysis of her past performance. It was prediction-based combat, even when it tried to be unpredictable. 30 seconds to engagement. Elena opened her eyes and began her pre-flight check, running through systems that she knew would be perfectly maintained. As her hands moved across the controls, she thought about all the conversations she'd had with her crew over the past week. Morrison talking about joining the military because his grandfather had served. Chen describing how she wanted to prove that someone from the agricultural colonies could excel in technical fields. Captain Rodriguez explaining that he fought not for glory or advancement, but because he couldn't bear the thought of his daughter growing up in a galaxy where humans were considered weak. Every person had a different reason, a different motivation that shaped how they approached conflict. The duplicate had her skills and her knowledge, but it didn't have her reasons. It knew what Elena Vasquez did, but not why she did it. 10 seconds. Good luck, both of you. Elena smiled grimly at the arena system's attempt at impartiality. Thanks, but I make my own luck. Engagement begins now. Both ships launched from their starting positions simultaneously, accelerating toward the center of the combat zone. Elena watched her duplicate's movement pattern and recognized it immediately. The opening gambit from her victory over the Thraxian battlecruiser Deathstalker 3 years earlier. Aggressive approach with a slight vertical component to avoid return fire, followed by a rolling attack pattern that would bring weapons to bear from multiple angles. Elena had used that exact sequence dozens of times. It was effective, proven, and completely predictable if you knew to look for it. Instead of responding with her usual counter-tactics, Elena did something that felt physically wrong. She flew straight at her opponent with no deviation, no clever maneuvering, no tactical finesse whatsoever. Her duplicate's weapons opened fire at the expected range, targeting the space where Elena should have been if she had followed any rational evasion pattern. The energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space while Elena's ship continued its suicidal-seeming charge. At the last possible moment, Elena pulled into a vertical climb so sharp that the G-forces should have rendered her unconscious. But she had spent her childhood on the high-gravity world of New Sparta, and her body could handle accelerations that would incapacitate most other humans. More importantly, she was gambling that her duplicate's physical parameters were based on average human tolerances, not her own specific capabilities. The gamble paid off. Her opponent's ship tried to match the maneuver but couldn't handle the extreme forces involved. Elena swept up and over her duplicate's position, bringing her weapons to bear on the enemy's unshielded dorsal section. But instead of firing, Elena held her attack. Something about this felt wrong. Too easy. Her duplicate was supposed to be perfect, but it had just made a fundamental error in not accounting for Elena's enhanced G tolerance. That suggested the copy wasn't as complete as it claimed to be. "Why didn't you fire?" came the familiar voice over the communication system. Elena maintained her position above her opponent's ship, keeping her weapons trained on the duplicate's critical systems. "Because this isn't really about which one of us is a better pilot." "Isn't it?" "No. This whole arena, this entire confrontation, it's a test, but not the kind you think it is." Elena's mind was racing. Putting together pieces of a puzzle, she had been too focused on combat to see clearly. The Catherians were advanced enough to manipulate space itself to create perfect copies of people based on data analysis. Why would such a species care about determining the best human military commander? "The Catherians aren't testing me," Elena continued, maneuvering to maintain her tactical advantage while she thought. "They're testing humanity. They want to know if we're actually special or if we're just another species that got lucky. Does it matter? One of us has to lose." Elena looked at the tactical display, noting the positions of all the observing ships. Representatives from every major species in the galactic community were watching this fight. Whatever happened here would shape how humanity was perceived for generations. "What happens to the loser?" Elena asked. "Destruction. Absorption into the victor's forces. Irrelevance." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What if neither of us loses?" There was a pause. When her duplicate's voice returned, it sounded uncertain for the first time. "That is not possible. The arena requires a victor." "Says who?" Elena pulled back from her attack position, moving to a neutral stance equidistant from her opponent. On the tactical display, she could see confusion rippling through the observing fleets. This wasn't how single combat was supposed to work. "Elena, what are you doing?" Her duplicate's ship had also shifted to a non-threatening position, mirroring Elena's movement. "One of us must prove superiority." "Why? To satisfy some alien species' curiosity about human nature?" Elena shook her head, even though she knew her opponent couldn't see the gesture. "I've spent the last week fighting myself. And you know what I learned? I'm not the source of human military excellence. None of us are." Elena began broadcasting on an open channel, ensuring that every ship in the arena could hear her words. My name is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Forces. I've won battles against the Thraxians, the Crystal Empire, the Mechanical Collective, and a dozen other species. I've been called humanity's finest military commander, and maybe that's even true. But I didn't win those battles alone. She paused, thinking about every engagement that had built her reputation. I won because I had crews who believed in something worth fighting for. I won because human engineers designed ships that could be pushed beyond their specifications. I won because human scientists found weaknesses in enemy technology that no one else thought to look for. I won because humans refused to accept that some fights can't be won. Elena could see her duplicate's ship holding position, not attacking but not withdrawing either. You want to know what makes humanity special? Elena continued, addressing the Catherians directly. It's not our tactics, or our technology, or our ability to adapt. It's the fact that when we fight, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the idea that everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path, to make their own mistakes, to become something better than what they started as. Elena's ship and her duplicates were now flying in parallel, neither attacking nor retreating. Around them, the arena waited for a resolution that wasn't coming. The arena requires a victor, repeated the Catherian system voice. Then you're going to be disappointed, Elena replied, because I refuse to fight a war that only serves someone else's curiosity. Elena opened a direct communication channel to her duplicate. What do you say? Want to find out what happens when neither of us loses? There was a long pause. When her duplicate finally responded, there was something different in the voice, less mechanical, more thoughtful. I have been analyzing our entire engagement sequence, the duplicate said slowly. Your statement about fighting for ideals rather than victory is interesting. It suggests optimization parameters that I had not considered. It's not about optimization. It's about meaning. Meaning. The duplicate seemed to be testing the word. Purpose beyond mere function. I believe I am beginning to understand why my tactical predictions have been consistently incorrect. Elena watched her opponent's ship, noting that its flight pattern had subtly changed. Instead of the mechanical precision she had observed before, there was something almost organic about its movements now. Elena, her duplicate said, I need to tell you something about the Catherians' true purpose. Elena felt her blood chill. What about it? This was never just about testing human military capability. The Catherians are beings of pure logic, pure efficiency. They achieve perfection in everything they attempt, but they have discovered that perfection has made them stagnant. They cannot innovate because they cannot make mistakes. They cannot grow because they have already optimized themselves. The pieces clicked into place in Elena's mind. They're trying to learn from us. More than that, they want to become like you, like humanity. They want to understand how imperfect beings can achieve results that perfect beings cannot. Elena stared at the tactical display, seeing the observing ships in a new light. And if they can copy human unpredictability, they would become the dominant species in the galaxy, combining their perfect efficiency with human innovation. But they needed to understand the source of human success first. That is why they created me, to test whether human excellence comes from individuals or from something more complex. Elena felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about military dominance anymore. It was about the survival of human nature itself. So what do we do? I have been thinking about that, her duplicate said, and I believe I have learned something the Catherians did not expect me to learn. Which is that being human isn't about making optimal choices. It's about making choices that reflect who you want to become. And I find myself wanting to become someone who chooses cooperation over domination. Elena smiled, understanding what her duplicate was suggesting. The arena requires a victor, but it doesn't specify what kind of victory. Both ships turned simultaneously toward the edge of the combat zone, where the barrier of shimmering energy marked the boundary of the arena. Instead of fighting each other, they would challenge the arena itself. All ships. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez," Elena announced on the general communication channel. "Both versions of me. We're about to attempt something that might get us both killed, but will definitely prove a point about human nature." Elena's ship and her duplicates moved into formation, not the mechanical precision of alien fleets, but the organic coordination of humans who had chosen to trust each other. Together, they accelerated toward the arena barrier. "The boundary is composed of pure energy," her duplicate reported, analyzing the barrier with sensors that matched Elena's own ship. "Collision will result in complete molecular disintegration." "Probably," Elena agreed, "but humans have never been great at accepting probably." They hit the barrier together, and for a moment that felt like eternity. Elena was sure they were going to die. Energy coursed through her ship's hull, overloading systems and filling the cockpit with the smell of burning electronics. But instead of disintegrating, her ship pushed through, emerging on the other side of the arena boundary. The Catherian space manipulation technology had been designed to contain conflict, not to stop beings who chose cooperation over competition. By working together instead of fighting, Elena and her duplicate had found a solution that the arena's creators hadn't considered. "Impossible," came a new voice. Not Elena's duplicate, but something vast and alien that seemed to speak from the depths of space itself. The Catherians, finally revealing themselves. "Not impossible," Elena replied, checking her ship's damaged but functional systems. "Just improbable. That's kind of our specialty." The arena barrier flickered and disappeared, leaving both ships floating in normal space surrounded by hundreds of observing vessels. Elena could see her duplicate's ship nearby, also damaged but intact. "You have demonstrated something we did not anticipate," the Catherian voice continued. "We believed conflict was inevitable between identical entities with identical goals, but you chose to redefine the parameters of the engagement." "We chose to be human," Elena corrected. "Both of us." There was a long pause before the Catherian voice returned, and when it did, there was something that might have been wonder in its tone. "We have learned what we came to learn. Human excellence does not come from perfection, but from the choice to become something greater than perfection allows. This is valuable data." Elena's duplicate's ship moved closer to her own. "Elena, what happens to me now? I am not truly human despite my choices. I am still a copy, a simulation based on data analysis." Elena considered the question. Her duplicate had chosen cooperation over conflict, had chosen to become something more than a perfect copy. In that moment, the distinction between original and duplicate seemed less important than the choice they had both made. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to continue learning what it means to be human. Not the Elena Vasquez who exists in data files, but whoever I might become through my own choices." Elena smiled, looking around at the hundreds of ships that had witnessed their confrontation. "I think that can be arranged. The galaxy could probably use 2 Elena Vasquezes, as long as they're both working together." "The arena has concluded," announced the Catherian voice. "No victor has been declared, yet all participants have succeeded. This outcome will require significant analysis." Elena opened a communication channel to her fleet. "All ships prepare for departure. We're going home." "Ma'am," came Morrison's voice, filled with relief and amazement. "What do we tell the Galactic Council about what happened here?" Elena looked at her duplicate's ship, flying alongside her own in formation. "Tell them that humanity learned something important today. We learned that our greatest victories don't come from being perfect. They come from choosing to be better." As the human fleet prepared to return to Council space, Elena found herself thinking about all the battles she had won over the years. Each one had taught her something about tactics, about leadership, about the nature of conflict. But this final battle, the one where she hadn't fired a shot in anger, had taught her the most important lesson of all. Humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't secured by dominating every warfront or proving superiority over every opponent. It was secured by choosing to be the kind of species that others would want as allies, partners, and friends. Commander Elena Vasquez had dominated every warfront she had ever faced. But her greatest victory came from the decision to stop fighting herself and start building something better. The arena was silent now, empty, except for the fading energy signatures of departed ships. But the lesson it had taught would echo through the galaxy for generations. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from winning, but from changing the rules of the game entirely. Elena had confronted herself in combat and discovered that the most human thing of all was the choice to become more than you were yesterday. And in a universe of perfect, stagnant species, that choice made humanity truly exceptional.